Hello and thank you for watching the Angry Rooster Creations channel. Today we're taking a look at another fountain pen. The particular subject of this video is this Hongdian 525 fountain pen. Now this here is an all brass fountain pen, and this one is a little bit special in that it has the 0.6 millimeter mini fude nib on it. Let me just show that real quick. We'll talk about that a little bit later when it comes time to talk about the nib itself. But like I said, this is a all brass fountain pen that has this sort of lacquered, sort of satin lacquered finish on it, this one being blue. And even though it has this section here that looks to be stainless, I was notified in another video that I did prior on the Hongdian 517S, which is around here somewhere, and it has a very similar section to this. And on that video, someone notified me that the section was not stainless steel, as I stated in that video, that it was brass. Well, in the case of this pen, you can see I actually took this one and did actually scratch the finish on that section right there with a file, and sure enough, it is brass underneath. So, this is indeed an all brass pen, with the exception, obviously, of the feed assembly and the nib being stainless. Now, this pen is dimensionally overall, when it's capped, it's 5 7/16 of an inch long. When it is uncapped, it is 4 3/4 of an inch. Posted, which it does post, and it posts securely, it is 5 7/8 of an inch posted. And the cap length itself is 2 3/8 of an inch. And the section length from there to the shelf where the barrel starts is right at about 1 inch. Now the widest, the thickest diameter of the barrel here is about 7/16 of an inch, which tapers down to roughly 1/4 inch at the tail, at the end finial. And the right here at the step down, the section is about 3/8 of an inch in diameter, and it tapers down to about 5/16 of an inch. Now, this is as I showed earlier, this is a piston fill converter. It is a 3.4 mil Chinese standard converter, so the larger of the two, and it does have the little spring, the spring agitator inside, like most of the Hongdian pens that I have, that I own, actually tend to have those agitators in there. Now, the clip on this pen is pretty stiff. It does not look to be a folded or stamped metal clip, so I do believe it actually is a brass clip that is chrome plated, and I believe that also to be the same with the finial caps, but it is a pretty stoutly sprung clip. You won't have a problem with this grabbing a pocket or potentially coming loose, falling out of a shirt or something. Now, like I said, this pen is fairly similar, here it is, to the 517S, and I am going to show this because I have done a video on the 517S. They are very similar in form and factor. The 517S here is larger in diameter, and obviously the 517S, it has a slightly different grip section. It has a bit of a wasted or sort of hourglass grip section to it, and it has a threaded cap, whereas the 525 has this this just simply tapered grip section. Now, I will say this. When I did the video on the 517S, I said that the metal grip section wasn't really all that much of an issue for me as far as being slippery. And part of that is due to the fact that it does have that sort of wasted grip shape, and it has these sort of turned ridges inside of this grip section that I didn't have a problem with this pen being slippery in my hands. I can say that the 525 here is unfortunately the first pen that I have actually used where the grip being slick is a bit of an issue for me. It is kind of easy for this pen to sort of want to roll in your fingers. It is slick, and I'm somebody who has I don't know if you can see my fingers there. I actually do have hand eczema, so my hands generally are chronically dry. I'm not somebody that has oily fingers, and that being the case, the section on this pen is actually quite slick in my fingers. So if you're somebody who is prone to having, oilier fingers, oilier hands, oilier skin, I have a feeling you would have a very hard time using this pen and feeling comfortable using this pen because it would be more slippery for you. Now me, I tend to sort of almost grab the pen farther back, roughly around here, where my fingers are kind of on that step down, which is a very minimal step down. It is not uncomfortable. But because of that, my fingers are on the lacquered portion of this barrel here. And that lacquered texture, sort of that satin texture, is not as slick as the grip section. Now, there are some versions of this pen, some of the colors. There's a yellow color, there's sort of a brown color, and I think maybe like a pinkish kind of color that you can get where both the section and the barrel and cap, all three parts, are lacquered instead of having this sort of spiral hatched chrome sort of plating that you have on this section on this pen. So stands to reason that on the versions where you have a lacquered grip section, it would be more akin to gripping this barrel, and I feel like those versions of this pen would probably actually be a little bit better feeling in the hand to write with. Now, that being said, I have written quite a bit with this pen. I've had this pen for a little bit, and like I said, I tend to find my hand resting right about there, and that's where I want to use this pen, hold this pen to write with it. And writing like that, it's not a problem, but if you're somebody that likes to choke up and get as close to the pen, to the nib and the feed, and get your fingers as close to the paper as possible, it's a bit slick. I'm going to be honest, it's a bit slick. Now, as far as the pen size, whether or not you need to write with this pen posted, I have a medium-large hand. The length of my fingers makes me wear a size large glove, but by sizing, the width of my hand is about the width that would normally be measured for a size medium glove. So my hands are somewhere between a medium and large size of gloves. So with that being said, you can see I don't really have a problem writing with this pen unposted. Even if I grip it farther back, it's not an issue. Obviously, posting does extend the length of the pen. With the pen posted, the center of balance is going to be just forward, about a ½ inch or so forward of where the cap rests on the pen, which for me, that puts it in front of the web of my hand, so it keeps the pen weighted towards the paper, which I prefer. I don't find back-weighted pens to be comfortable, or just writing utensils in general. So as far as that goes, posted or unposted, I think most people could write with the pen either way, and the cap does not backweight the pen. The pen itself, even though it is all metal, the walls of the barrel and all are quite thin, and so this pen is not very heavy for a metal pen. It's a quite slim pen. Now I'd like to move on to a writing portion of this review to kind of showcase the nib. This pen currently is inked with Monteverde California Teal. And like I said, this is the 0.6 millimeter mini fude nib on this pen. Now, what I found, I sat here and talked with it uncapped, so excuse the hard start. What I found is that, if I can learn how to spell, is that this pen tends to write most like a medium in practice. Now this paper I'm using here is actually an art paper. It's a Blick 50-pound white sulfite drawing paper. It handles ink so-so, but for the sake of drawing it is better, or for the sake of writing, excuse me, on this test, it's better than, say, 20-pound copy paper. But this pen does, in the horizontal stroke, it does have a tendency to write a broader stroke than in the vertical. If I don't change the angle and I just change the stroke direction, you can see that it does, these horizontal strokes are broader than the vertical strokes. Now I say that, you can see my hand orientation here. I tend to have my hand to the side when I write, as opposed to having a more, I guess, typical orientation. So for most people who write broad and vertical respective are going to be backwards for me. So, but generally speaking, when you're going with the length of the pen, that's considered the vertical, and you're going across with the pen, that's considered the horizontal stroke. So, but it does change. It does have a slightly wider stroke, horizontal stroke. Now, it is a fude. It is a very minimal fude, but it is a fude in that if you go more vertical with the pen, you will get a thinner line. And as you begin to change the angle that you are writing at, you will get a broader line. Now, it is not as extreme or exaggerated as a more typical or traditional fude nib. So as you can kind of see there, you can see it going from thin to thick. But you can, if I turn this up, I can write if I go more vertical with the pen, I can write pretty thin, and then if I forget how to write, if I write at a more of an angle, you can see that it does change the boldness of the line here. So you can see that difference in line weight. So if you are, paying attention to the angle that you're using the brush, the pen, you can get quite a different size. You can go from a fine to a pretty rather bold medium. I wouldn't consider it a broad. I would still consider it a medium. It's obviously not going to be as drastic of a change in line weight as, say, a more traditional, much more bent fude, because on this little mini fude, as you can see, all that's really bent is the tipping material. So you're not going to get those really big, fat, wide brush strokes that you would usually get with a lot of fude nibs. But the difference is this one is actually, in my opinion, usable for writing, whereas a more traditional bent nib or fude nib, it is more of an art and drawing tool. You can write with them, but you have to almost keep the pen vertical, and it feels a bit awkward. Whereas this one, you can take a more, typical drawing, you can have a more typical writing angle and write comfortably with it. Now, I did kind of squiggle it around. I was able to get sort of a couple skips in there. But for the most part, the flow is pretty consistent. I have not had really any flow issues with the pen. And as far as trying to coax line weight, this pen doesn't really want to spring or flex any if you put any extra pressure on it. Some of the Hongdian pens that I've used in the past, not necessarily the 517 that I've shown, but like the Black Forest pens, the M2 pens, the C2 pens, they have a sort of a springy kind of soft nibs that you can coax a little bit of line variation with. This one, you can't, but then again, it is sort of that fude nib. It's more about changing angle. It would kind of defeat the purpose if this nib was to flex. and give any kind of line variation. So adding more pressure is not really going to do a whole lot for you. And I will say that this pen does not really reverse write very well. It does. It is extremely scratchy, and it dries out really quick. So if you are looking for reverse writing, this mini fude nib does not do it. But if you want to go sort of above vertical, so you want to incline this way, and you want to get some extremely fine lines, you can. Like you're in Pilot or Platinum extra fine territory there. But it is a rather awkward writing angle, but you can get those line weights. So you can go from quite thin to quite bold with the same nib. And, you know, that's really going to do it for this video. All in all, I think it's a pretty good pen. I really do like this nib. It is actually very smooth. I should have mentioned that. It is very smooth when you're writing with it. It is a very smooth pen. So, whereas other fude nibs I think are more of an art tool, I see this one more as a writing pen. And doing so, it feels very smooth on the paper. It feels really good. It has good flow. I haven't had any issues with the flow or anything in this pen so far. I will kind of ding the pen a bit on that grip section. That grip section is quite slippery, like even for me. And like I said, I typically don't have issues with oily fingers and having slippery grip, but even for me, somebody with rather dry hands, that can be quite slick. So it does alter where you grab the pen. But like I said, there are a couple color options of this pen that have lacquered grip sections that would feel and grip like the barrel. So those are possibly the better options, but you know, you're kind of limited on colors, but I don't know if that really matters to most people. Now, as far as the price on this pen, I paid $9 for this pen. I was ordering some stuff on Amazon, and I needed like, I don't know, $6 or something to add to the order, and I was going to get charged about $7 worth of shipping, so I was like, meh, it's $9. I'd rather pay $9 for the pen than $7 in shipping, so I went ahead and added this to an order. For that price, I think it's worth it. So far, I haven't had issues with this drying out, but like I said, if I was to do it again, I would pick like the yellow version, which is more of a cream ivory color. It's called yellow because it has the lacquer grip section, knowing what I know now. But that being said, do I regret buying it? No, I don't. Now, it is a lacquered pen. You might want to be careful about how you carry this. You probably don't want to clip it into your pocket with other metal objects because that lacquer can scratch. Lacquered pens can scratch, and you'll scratch down to the bare brass. So, you know, I wouldn't consider putting this in a pant pocket where you carry a pocket knife or car keys, or putting it in a shirt pocket with other metal pens. But that having all been said, I think that's going to do it for this video. If you liked the video, you got some good information out of it, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. That would help me out. And also, if you have any questions about this particular pen, you know, any questions, or maybe you have some relevant input with your experience with the pen that may differ from mine, you know, throw it down there in the comment section. That helps me out, and it might help other viewers out that read your comment. And if you watch this video, maybe you watch some others, you like the way I try to present my information and do my videos, you know, it's still a work in progress. I'm trying to get better at this, but I would appreciate a subscription. That would also really help me out. But having all that been said, I thank you for watching, and I hope to catch you on the next one. Bye.